Hi, so today we're going to have a look at Recoil. And as always, any comments, likes, subscribes are very welcome. Always happy to interact with people. And before we start, I just want to give you my normal disclaimer that what you see today is a basic demo. There will, of course, be other and probably better ways of going about this, depending on what it is exactly you're trying to do. And obviously, if you're going to use Recoil in a production app, I'd certainly advise you to do some research. So yeah, this is just a look at really the very basics of it. So what is Recoil? Well, Recoil is a state management library for React. You might have used or at least have heard of Redux, a much complained about state management library, which many people just find overcomplicated and confusing, or at least very annoying. You may also have used React's own context API, which is much simpler than Redux. Well, Recoil is just another potential choice, and it's much less hassle than Redux, and in that respect, at least, it looks quite nice. So as I say, we're going to have a look at a really basic example. So what we've got on the screen here is a family tree, and this family tree has got a grandparent, parent, child, and a grandchild. Now, it's also a React component tree where each component is a child of the one above it. And if that's too meta for you, I quite understand. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Yeah, we're basically going to prove two things then with this little app. One, that you can pass the state down from a single source of truth with Recoil. So instead of having to drill down through the props, which I'll just talk about a little bit more in a moment. The second thing then that we'll show is that you can update that source of truth. And that's what these buttons down here are for. They're going to change the age of this child, who at the moment is -1 year old. Okay, so let's just have a quick look then at what's going on here. So in our app component, I've already put some instructions in here for us to set up the Recoil, but just a quick overview. So app is rendering this family tree component. Family tree is rendering the grandparent, and the grandparent is passing a prop. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. The grandparent component is rendering the parent component, and the parent component is rendering child component, and of course the child component is rendering the grandchild component. Now, the grandchild component then has got this name already input, so that's props.grandchildren name, and we've passed that all the way down from family tree. So here we are, we've got some state up here in family tree, grandchild name, set grandchild name. We set that to Frank, and that is being passed right down through those 4 props. So it's this kind of state management that we really want to avoid. So obviously, this app is not going to work at the moment because we haven't got any state there. So basically, I've broken it. Let's put it back together. So if we go over to the app.js component, and now we need to set about sorting out Recoil. So what do we need to do? So firstly, we need to import Recoil. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're actually going to bring in various parts of Recoil. We're going to bring in Recoil root, and we're going to bring in Atom. And that's all we need for the moment. So we're bringing that in from Recoil. Great. Now, the next thing that we need to do then is set up our atom. Now, an atom is basically what Recoil calls state. So this is going to be our source of truth. So how do we set that up? The syntax is going to look fairly familiar, I think. So I'm going to call this family state. And we're going to set it equal to an atom. And then inside the brackets, I'm going to open this up into an object. And we need to have names for the 4 family members. So we've got grandparent, grandparents, parent, child, and grandchild. Right, let's just bring them out onto their own line. So the grandparent, I'm going to give him the name of Ron. And where's my comma gone? The parent, I'll give the name Sal. And the child, I'm going to give the name Dave. And the grandchild, I'm going to give the name Mickey. Okay, so there we've got our object. That's not all we need in here. So first thing that we actually need is a way of identifying this data. So it takes this key property, and the key just has to be a unique way of identifying this data. I'm going to call it family state. Whatever you call it, just remember it's unique ID, which we will use to reference this with other components. Now, that data that we've put in here then actually needs to form its own object within the object, and this is called default. So I'll just see if we can tidy that up. That's a bit better. So yeah, we've got two things then. We've got the unique identity that we call the key, and then the default, which is the state before anything has sort of interfered with it or changed it. Right. Now, down here in app, so this one here says set up the atom for age. We're going to come back to that later because I'll explain a bit more in a minute about why we're using two slightly different techniques here. It does tell us down here we need to wrap app in Recoil. So if you've done any other context stuff before, this will probably be quite familiar. So Recoil root, so Recoil root, by the way, which we bought in when we imported the atom, we're just going to put that there, and then everything, which is only really our family tree component, is going to go in there. So that's all we need to do for the moment with this app component. So we've imported Recoil, we've set up our source of truth, and we have wrapped the rest of the component in Recoil root. Now, I want to come over to the child component, and this is where we're going to receive some of this data. So again, we need to import a few bits and pieces. So we're going to import atom, because we'll be using that. And now we're going to actually import a couple of hooks. I'm going to import useRecoilValue and useRecoilState. Now, you certainly don't always need both of those. They do different things. useRecoilValue is the more simplistic. So this one is going to be basically for sort of one-way props. So you're just receiving some state, consuming it, and displaying it or whatever, but you're not passing it back up. useRecoilState allows you to send state back up to the source of truth, basically to change or update state. So for the moment, we're going to use the more basic one, useRecoilValue. So again, we need to set up our atoms. So I'm going to call this one const family names, and I'm going to set that equal to an atom, and then again we've got an object in the atom, and the key is going to be the same key that we used over here, which was family state. So let's have that one. And it also has a default value, and that default value, we might just put name unknown. Oh, and it looks like I've done my favorite mistake. I've made my favorite mistake of forgetting to say where we are importing from. That's better. Right, so yeah. Then we've set up this atom, so we've got our unique identifier to hook it up with the atom we created earlier, because of course you may well have multiple, and we've given it a default value. So now down in our component, down in our child component, what we want to do next is basically just set about consuming that state. So I'm going to say const names, and I'm going to set that equal to the useRecoilValue, because we're just consuming, we're not actually going to be sending anything back up. And it's just going to take in this object that we set up earlier. Right. Now, we're basically there. All we need to do is put in here child, and now we want to get the child's name. We're not going to worry about the age yet. We'll do that later. So what will the child's name be? Well, it's going to come from this names prop there. And if we go back to our app.js, well, the child's the key was child. So it's going to be names.child. Let's just save that and see what we get. And there we are. We've got, well, we've got some names. Interesting. We've got, let me give that a little refresh. Oh, here we are. There we are. So now we have got, the child is indeed Dave. So that's the important thing. The child is Dave. Why is the child Dave? Well, because we have got here child Dave. So you can see what's happening. We've created our state, and then in the child component, we've consumed that state, and we've just given the child's name right there. A slight question mark over the others, because I had already set up these components. So Frank, we've already talked about. Frank is hard-coded. That is drilled down through the props. Sal seems to be working just fine. So Sal is the parent. So we've got name.parent, but the grandparent doesn't appear to be working for some reason. So we've got export default function grandparent, takes in the props. That's just to pass that down to the grandchild. But so name. No obvious reason as to why that is not working. But yet it's not working. Basically should be the same as the parent one, which is working. So we're importing the one below it, which is fine. We're importing atom and useRecoilValue, setting up the family name, default function, grandparent, parent, that's fine. And then it should be just name.grandparent. That should be coming straight from here. Ah, that's the one. So I've put that lowercase when it should have been uppercase. I think that's going to make it work. Yeah, there we are. So we've got our names, Ron, Sal, Dave, and then the one which is passed down manually. So if you recall, the child is just, the grandchild is just getting the name Frank just through the standard drilled props.grandchild, which has come all the way down. Okay, so that works. We've done the first part. We've set up some state which just goes one way. Now let's think about setting up some state which can go two ways. So if we come back to our app component here, now let's set up a bit of state for this child's age. So I'm just going to call it const child age state. It's not very original. And again, we're setting up an atom, and inside that atom we have got our key. And our key here, we're going to call that the same thing, child age state. And really simple then, this default value is just going to be a number, and in this case 0. So if we don't put anything, the child will be 0 years old. And that's it. Do we need the trailing comma there? I don't think we do. That's absolutely fine. Now we don't have to do much more here because we've already wrapped the app in this function. We can take away that green. So all we have to remember is that unique ID. Now let's save that and we'll put back the child component. So just like before, then we have got everything we need imported. And now let's just set up another atom to get this age so we can consume the age. And in here, we're going to go for const, should we call this one child age? And we're saying this equal to, of course, an atom. And inside our object, we've got our key. And we know that that is child age state. And again, we've got the default, which we can set. Well, you could set it to whatever you want. I'm just going to set it to 0 for now. And then we need to do what we've done here, which is to set up some sort of internal state for this function. Now, as you will probably recall, we brought in 2 hooks here, and we haven't used this one because this one is going to allow us to update the single source of truth state that we've actually got up in the app component. So let's try using that one here. So we're going to say const, and now this is going to look exactly like useState in React. So we've got age, and set age for the sake of argument is going to equal useRecoilState, and bring in the name here of our atom, which is child age. So child name is aged. What's that going to be? Well, it is surely just going to be age. Aged years old. Let's just give that a save and see what we get on our app. So we now have got age 0 years old. Should we try changing this, see if that works? That make him 10. He is 10 years old. Okay, no problem. So how can we then use this one, set age, to update state? Well, guess what? It's basically the same as you would use in the regular useState hook from React. So let's get rid of some of these prompts. We don't need them anymore. Tidy things up a little bit. We're going to put some buttons in here. Might just format before we do that. So in this div here, then I'm going to put in 2 buttons. Didn't want to do that. VS Code not going to play ball with me and let me have 2 cursors. Here we are. Yes, it is. So we have got a couple of buttons here. Okay, VS Code is not going to play ball with me. Let's just do it the old-fashioned way. So inside these buttons, we're going to need an on-click function. A function to call onClick, which we'll fill in a second. I've given these a class name already in CSS, so we'll come to that. And let's just put in here the word year for now. And that's that. So this one, then the first one is going to be, we'll call that -year. And this one here, we're going to call +year. And the class name, I think I just gave it minus and plus to keep it simple. That's just to give the buttons a little bit of style, make it look a little bit nicer. And let's just have a minus sign here, minus year, and a plus sign there, plus year. So those are just going to bring up or bring down the ages. Right, now all we need to do is set up these two buttons. So a couple of arrow functions will do the trick. Const minus year then is equal to an arrow function. And what's that going to do? It's going to use the set age. And what do we want to return? Of course, age +1. Oh, not plus, exclamation mark. And pretty much the same thing. Oh, sorry. That one should be minus year, should be age, of course, -1, and plus year should be set age +1. Let's format that, give it a save. And we've got two buttons, one pink, one green. Let's see if they work. There we are. So that is absolutely fine. So we're using this here. Oop. Didn't want to show you that. There we are, to update that state. Pretty easy, I think. Pretty easy. And there's plenty more that you can do with Recoil. That's, you know, a very sort of shallow dive into it. And obviously stuff there you can do really, really easily with use context. But sometimes use context is just not going to be enough. So it's always good to have other things up your sleeve. Right. Any feedback, really welcome. Any comments, likes, subscribes, criticism, always good. Follow me on Twitter. And thanks for watching.